December 13th, 2011. Marietta, Georgia. The final F-22 Raptor rolls off the assembly line at Lockheed Martin's sprawling factory. Workers in safety vests line the hangar floor, applauding. Executives shake hands. Someone takes a photograph.
Oh.
Nobody in that building understands what has just ended.
Oh.
Nobody yet grasps that they have not witnessed the conclusion of a production run. They have witnessed the commission of the most expensive strategic mistake in the history of American air warfare. The bridge is burned. Somewhere over Chengdu, a black angular shape is already taxiing onto a runway, waiting for the world to notice. To understand how America arrived at that moment in that Georgia hangar, we must rewind to the mindset of the late 2000s. The United States stood as the undisputed hyperpower of the world. The Soviet Union was a distant memory. The Russian Federation was struggling to maintain its legacy fleet of Cold War relics. The Chinese People's Liberation Army Air Force was composed largely of reverse-engineered Soviet design's third-generation aircraft that posed no meaningful threat to American air dominance. The Pentagon was focused entirely on the global war on terror. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan demanded drones, mine-resistant vehicles, and close air support. They did not. The argument went, require a $300 million air superiority fighter designed to kill adversaries that did not yet exist. The Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor became the victim of this logic. Originally, the Air Force had planned to procure 750 of these apex predators to replace the aging F-15 Eagles, one for one. It was to be a fleet so overwhelming that no nation would dare contest American airspace. But year by year, that number was whittled down. It dropped to 339, then to 277. Finally, in 2009, under Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, the decision was made to cap production at just 187 operational aircraft. The rationale was seductive in its simplicity. Intelligence assessments confidently predicted that China would not have a fifth-generation stealth fighter capability until the late 2020s at the earliest. The F-35 Joint Strike Fighter was on the horizon, promising a cheaper multi-role alternative. The F-22 was characterized as a gold-plated relic of the Cold War, a solution in search of a problem. So the line was shut down. The jigs were packed up. Specialized tooling was stored or destroyed. The supply chain was allowed to wither. The United States had confidently bet that 187 Raptors would be enough to hold the line for 40 years. That confidence was shattered almost immediately. In January of 2011, just weeks before the F-22 line was effectively condemned, ex-Secretary Gates was visiting Beijing in an attempt to improve military-to-military relations. Back home, the Chinese internet had begun buzzing with grainy photographs taken outside the Chengdu Aerospace Corporation airfield. They showed a large, black, angular aircraft taxiing on the runway. It bore the unmistakable serrated edges and chined nose of a stealth fighter. It was the J-20 Mighty Dragon. The initial Western reaction was dismissal. Analysts called it a mock-up, a propaganda tool, a crude copy that would never fly. When it did fly, they pivoted to criticizing its engines, its canards, its size. The prevailing narrative was that, while China might build a shell that resembled a stealth fighter, they lacked the complex metallurgy, the avionics, and the sensor fusion to make it a weapon of war. It was a paper tiger. This was the second strategic blindness. The West assumed that Chinese aerospace development would follow the same slow, linear path that Western development had followed. They failed to account for the speed of civil-military fusion and the ruthless efficiency of a command economy locked onto a singular objective. While the United States spent the 2010s wrestling with sequestration, budget battles, and the teething problems of the F-35 program, the engineers at Chengdu were sprinting. The J-20 went from rough prototype to refined pre-production model in record time. They iterated the design relentlessly, reshaping intakes, refining flight control software, experimenting with new radar-absorbent coatings. By 2017, the J-20 had officially entered service. The timeline American intelligence had predicted that China wouldn't field a stealth fighter until the late 2020s had been beaten by a full decade. But the true shock was not simply that the plane existed. It was how quickly China figured out how to build them, and at what scale. In the West, building fifth-generation fighters is a slow, artisanal process. It demands exotic materials, impossibly tight tolerances, and a supply chain stretched across dozens of nations. When the F-22 was in production, Lockheed Martin struggled to deliver 2 jets per month. The assumption in Washington was that China would face the same bottlenecks. That assumption was catastrophically wrong. Recent satellite imagery and open-source intelligence from the Chengdu Aerospace Corporation facilities reveal a manufacturing expansion that borders on the extraordinary. Pulsating assembly lines, advanced robotics, a scale of industrial mobilization that the United States has not witnessed since the height of the Cold War. The F-22 fleet is now fixed, finite. Every time a Raptor suffers a mishap or succumbs to metal fatigue, the number drops. There will never be another one. Meanwhile, according to open-source defense analysts, including those at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, China is producing over 100 J-20 airframes per year, a figure projected to climb. To absorb that number, China is adding more heavy stealth air superiority fighters to its inventory every single year than the total number of combat-coded F-22s the United States has available for deployment in any given crisis. The mighty Dragon is no longer a rare sight or a propaganda piece. It is becoming the standard backbone of the People's Liberation Army Air Force. We are watching the transition from a boutique fleet of prototypes to a massive operational swarm. The era of American stealth monopoly is not just ending, it is dead and buried. The decision in 2011 to cap the F-22 at 187 units was made for a world that no longer exists. The gamble that we have enough has failed. We are facing a competitor who studied the American playbook, mastered it, and then built the industrial capacity to execute it at a scale Washington simply did not believe possible. The swarm is not coming. The swarm is here. For years, a comforting story circulated through the halls of the Pentagon and across Western defense analysis circles. It allowed American military planners to sleep soundly at night, despite the rapid emergence of China's stealth fighter program. The narrative went something like this. The J-20 was impressive on the outside, but beneath its radar-absorbing skin, it was hollow. It was a beast with a fatal flaw. It looked like a 5th-generation killer, but it lacked the beating heart of a true predator. That criticism was not without merit at first. When the J-20 broke cover in 2011, and for many years after entering service, it was powered by the Russian AL-31F, and later the domestic WS-10C. These were capable engines for 4th-generation fighters like the Su-27 or the J-10, but they were woefully inadequate for a heavy 5th-generation air superiority platform. They lacked the raw thrust to push the massive Chinese airframe to supersonic speeds without engaging the afterburners. In stealth warfare, afterburner use is a death sentence. It turns a cold, invisible ghost into a screaming thermal beacon that illuminates every infrared sensor in the theater. Without the ability to supercruise to sustain speeds above Mach 1 on dry thrust alone, the J-20 could not patrol at high energy, could not dictate the terms of an engagement, could not be a true air dominance fighter. It was fast, but only in short fuel-guzzling bursts. Dangerous, but compromised. That era of compromise is over. The comfortable narrative has been shattered by a single piece of technology that changes the strategic calculus of the Pacific entirely. That technology is the WS-15 turbofan engine, named after one of China's sacred mountains, and the product of decades of struggle, billions in investment, and a ruthless determination to solve the one problem that had always held Chinese aerospace back. The WS-15 is not an incremental upgrade. It is a generational leap. Reports from open-source aviation analysts indicate the new power plant generates approximately 40,000 pounds of thrust, rivaling the Pratt and Whitney F-119 engines that power the F-22 Raptor. With 2 of these installed, the J-20 finally achieves the kinematic holy grail that eluded it for a decade: true supercruise. The mighty Dragon can now patrol at speeds exceeding Mach 1.54 extended periods without touching the afterburner. It can traverse the vast distances of the South China Sea or the Philippine Sea in half the time. Arriving at the engagement zone with a high-energy state and full fuel tanks, it can launch its long-range missiles with dramatically more kinetic energy, shrinking the window enemy pilots have to react. The integration of the WS-15 erases the primary kinematic advantage the F-22 held over its Chinese counterpart. For years, the Raptor was the undisputed king of high-energy maneuvering, It could outrun and outclimb anything in the sky. A J-20 equipped with WS-15 engines is no longer kinetically inferior. It brings the Chinese fighter into the same weight class as the American champion. We are no longer looking at a lopsided contest. We're looking at a peer-to-peer engagement where both sides possess the ability to dominate the kinematic spectrum. Furthermore, the WS-15 brings more than speed. It brings power. Modern aerial warfare is an electronic game. Massive AESA radars, electronic warfare jamming suites, and high-speed data links all consume immense electricity. The new engines feed the JT-20's voracious avionics appetite, allowing the aircraft to jam enemy radars with greater power, burn through interference with its own sensors, and process targeting data faster than before. It transforms the J-20 into an electronic fortress, as loud in the electromagnetic spectrum as it is quiet on radar. The arrival of the WS-15 signals something deeper than a single capability improvement. For decades, the one thing China could not reliably build was a high-performance jet engine. It was the Achilles heel of the entire People's Liberation Army Air Force. They could build the hulls, the radars, the missiles, but they had to buy the engines from Moscow. That dependency made them vulnerable. The successful mass production of the WS-15 proves that China has solved the single most technically demanding problem in aviation: the metallurgy of single crystal turbine blades capable of surviving temperatures that exceed the melting point of the surrounding metal. They have achieved total self-sufficiency in the production of fifth-generation combat power. This leads to a chilling convergence that defense planners had not fully anticipated. We established the overwhelming numerical advantage of the Chinese manufacturing machine. The comforting counterargument was always, yes, they have many, but they are inferior. The WS-15 destroys that counterargument. We are now witnessing the birth of a fleet that is not only larger than the American stealth fleet, it is becoming technologically comparable. Do not imagine them as the underpowered, compromised jets of the past. Imagine a swarm of fully capable supercruising dominance fighters, fast enough to chase a retreating tanker, agile enough to threaten a Raptor and emerge, ranged enough to strike Guam and return, and being built at a pace that the United States cannot match. The nightmare scenario for the U.S. Air Force is not just fighting a swarm, it is fighting a swarm of Ferraris. The J-20 is no longer a paper tiger waiting to be exposed. It is a dragon that has finally found its fire. The qualitative gap that the United States relied on to offset its numerical disadvantage is evaporating before our eyes. The question is no longer whether the JT-20 is good enough. The question is, how do you stop 1,000 of them? In the sterile, air-conditioned rooms where modern wars are wargamed and simulated, there is a cold, hard truth that gets lost amidst discussions of sensor fusion and stealth coatings. It is the brutal, unforgiving logic of mathematics. For 30 years, the United States Air Force operated on the assumption that technology conquers all. Build the most advanced, invisible, and lethal aircraft in history, and the enemy will be so overwhelmed by quality that quantity becomes irrelevant. As we look toward the strategic horizon of the 2030s, that assumption is colliding with a numerical reality that borders on catastrophic. It is a problem no amount of pilot skill or software updates can easily solve. To understand the depth of this crisis, we must conduct a brutally honest audit of the defenders. The United States Air Force is touted as the largest and most capable in the world. But strip away the tankers, the transports, the trainers, and the specialized support aircraft, and the tip of the spear is shockingly thin. The primary defender of American air dominance is the Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor. It is the only fighter in the Western inventory designed exclusively to penetrate the most heavily defended airspace on Earth and kill other fifth-generation fighters. It is the apex predator. There are roughly 180 of them in existence. That number is misleadingly optimistic. It includes aircraft in long-term maintenance, aircraft assigned to testing at Edwards Air Force Base, and aircraft and training squadrons at Tyndall and Langley. Filter out the non-combat coated airframes, and the Raptor's ready to fight. Tonight drop to approximately 120. Apply the standard mission capable rate for a complex stealth platform, hovering around 50 to 60%, and the fleet available for a Pacific deployment shrinks to perhaps 60 or 70 jets. That is the entire shield protecting American interests across the Pacific. The Pentagon argues that the F-35 Lightning II will fill the gap. After all, thousands are planned. But the F-35 was never designed to be an air superiority fighter. It is a multi-role strike aircraft, a quarterback designed to gather data, coordinate the battle, and deliver precision weapons. It is slower than the J-20, has a lower service ceiling, and carries fewer air-to-air missiles internally. Asking the F-35 to go toe-to-toe with a swarm of high-altitude, supercruising J-20s is asking a linebacker to beat an Olympic sprinter. It can fight. But it is fighting outside its weight class. The F-15EX Eagle II is a formidable missile truck, capable of carrying a staggering array of weaponry, but it is a fourth-generation airframe. In a stealth versus stealth fight, it will be detected and targeted long before it can bring its arsenal to bear. Against this fragile, fragmented American defense, you must overlay the trajectory of the Chengdu Aerospace Corporation. Current intelligence projections, cited by analysts at institutions including RAND and CSIS, suggest a J-20 fleet that could reach 1,000 airframes by the 2030 to 2035 timeframe if current and projected production rates hold. 1,000 J-20s against 60 to 70 deployable Raptors. This brings us to the ratio that haunts Pacific Command, 5-1. For every single F-22 the United States can scramble in a crisis over Taiwan or the South China Sea, 5 J-20 stealth fighters may be waiting. This is not a tactical disadvantage. It is a strategic drowning. Even granting that the American pilot is better trained and the Raptor marginally superior in technology, the physics of combat break down at these odds. Let us play out the engagement as wargamers do without sentiment. A flight of 4 F-22s detects a formation of 20 J-20s. The Raptors hold the advantage of the first shot. They are invisible, fast, and lethal. Each carries 6 AIM-1-0 radar-guided missiles internally, total of 24 missiles for the American flight. They fire everything. Assume a kill probability, historically unprecedented, nearly every missile hits. 18, perhaps 19 Chinese jets are destroyed. It is a heroic performance, the kind that would make aces weep with admiration. Then the warning lights flash. The Raptors are Winchester out of ammunition, and there is still 1 J-20 left, or a second wave of 20 behind the first. The Raptors, now toothless, must turn and sprint supersonic toward a tanker or a base hundreds of miles away. While they are gone, the airspace opens. Surviving J-20s push forward to slaughter the support assets, the tankers, the AWACS, the fourth-generation fighters that depended on the Raptors for protection. The Americans lose the battle not because their pilots failed, not because their planes were inferior, but because they ran out of missiles before the enemy ran out of jets. The psychological weight of this disparity is crushing. The American commander knows that every F-22 lost is a permanent reduction in national power. There are no replacements coming. The production line is cold. The tooling is gone. The Chinese commander knows he can trade 3, 4, even 5 J-20s for 1 Raptor and still come out ahead strategically. His factories will replace the losses next month. American factories cannot. We have spent 3 decades focused on the kill chain, how fast we can detect and shoot. We forgot about the supply chain, how long we can sustain the fight. At a certain point, quantity becomes its own quality. When the ratio hits 5-1, the math stops being a theory. It becomes a verdict. The United States is bringing the world's sharpest knife to a gunfight. The enemy has brought 1,000 guns. If one analyzes the physical geometry of the J-20 Mighty Dragon, a realization emerges. It is long, heavy, and surprisingly substantial for a stealth fighter. For years, critics mocked this size, comparing it unfavorably to the compact aggression of the F-16 or the acrobatic lethality of the F-22. In a turning fight within visual range, they argued the J-20 would be sluggish, a lumbering giant, easy prey. They were asking the wrong question. The designers at Chengdu did not build the J-20 to win a knife fight in a phone booth. They built a sniper, machine designed to execute one specific, ruthless strategy that targets the single greatest vulnerability of American power in the Pacific, its absolute addiction to fuel. To understand the tanker killer strategy, look at the map. The Pacific theater is defined by distance in a way that no other potential battlefield is. American air bases in Guam, Japan, and Hawaii are separated from the potential combat zones in the Taiwan Strait by hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles. An F-22 Raptor, for all its technological brilliance, has a combat radius of roughly 500 miles. It cannot take off from Guam, fly to the Taiwan Strait, fight a high-intensity engagement, and return. The help comes in the form of aerial refueling tankers. The Boeing KC-135 Stratotanker and the newer KC-46 Pegasus. These massive converted airliners are the circulatory system of the United States Air Force. They are the flying gas stations that allow American fighters to project power across oceans. Without them, the entire Pacific Air Campaign collapses within hours. The Chinese doctrine identifies these tankers as priority targets. They call them enablers. And unlike the stealth fighters they support, these enablers are slow, enormous, and radiologically deafening. On a radar screen, AKC-135 blazes like a searchlight. It cannot hide, it cannot run, carries no meaningful defenses. It is the most valuable and most vulnerable aircraft in the American inventory. This is where the J-20 swarm finds its true strategic purpose. In a major conflict, the People's Liberation Army Air Force has no intention of honoring American air superiority by sending J-20s to joust with T-22s. That is an attrition game they do not need to play. The strategy is to use the swarm to bypass the knights and kill the horses. Imagine the tactical application. A swarm of 50 J-20s launches from the Chinese mainland. American Raptors scramble to intercept, forming a defensive wall. Pilots are ready. Their systems are primed. But the J-20 formation splits. A portion of the swarm engages the Raptors, firing missiles not to score kills, but to force the Americans defensive. To make them turn, burn energy, and look away. To occupy them completely, while the Raptors deal with the immediate threat. The rest of the J-20 swarm, the assassin flight, uses its speed and frontal stealth to slip past the chaotic front line. These jets are not hunting fighters, they are hunting the backfield. They are sprinting toward tankers, loitering hundreds of miles behind the fighter screen, where no threat was supposed to reach them. This is where the Place-15 air-to-air missile becomes the most dangerous weapon in the theater. With a range exceeding 180 miles, the J-20 does not need to approach the tanker. It can launch from the edge of the stratosphere, guiding its weapon via data link until the missile's own active radar seeker acquires the massive aluminum profile of the tanker. The tanker has no stealth, no countermeasures capable of defeating a modern radar-guided missile at that range. It is a sitting duck in the middle of the ocean. When the missile strikes, a cascade begins, what strategists call the collapse. The F-22s and F-35s fighting on the front lines receive the call no pilot ever wants to hear. Their gas station is gone. They check their fuel gauges. 20 minutes of flying time remaining. Home base is 600 miles away. The math is merciless. There is nowhere to land. There's no one coming to help. The most sophisticated machines ever constructed by human civilization, worth hundreds of millions of dollars each, the product of decades of engineering genius, effectively become gliders. Pilots eject over open water, watching as their stealth fighters spiral into the waves. Undefeated in combat, destroyed by logistics. The swarm wins without winning a single dogfight. This strategy illuminates every design decision that critics have mocked in the J-20. Its great size to carry the internal fuel load needed to range deep into the Pacific and hunt without its own tankers. Its emphasis on frontal stealth and straight-line speed over rear aspect stealth and maneuverability. Because it is designed to punch through the defensive line and sprint, not to circle and turn. Its extraordinary range because the prey it hunts lives far behind the front. When we ask whether the U.S. Air Force can handle a swarm of 1,000 J-20s, focusing on pilot skill or turning radius is asking the wrong question entirely. The danger of the swarm is that it possesses the numbers to sacrifice 10 jets to kill one tanker. And that is a trade China will make every day of a conflict. Because when the tankers die, American air power in the Pacific evaporates. Not through defeat in battle, through the quiet, merciless mathematics of fuel. If the previous acts have painted a grim picture, a dwindling, irreplaceable fleet of F-22 Raptors, facing a rising tide of Chengdu J-20 mighty dragons. Armed now with the engines to match their ambition, then this final chapter is the story of the counterpunch. The United States Air Force is painfully aware of the math problem. The generals in the Pentagon can count. They know that in a war of industrial attrition, fighting hull for hull against the manufacturing might of modern China is a losing proposition. The United States cannot build F-22s anymore. It cannot build F-35s fast enough to match the explosive growth of the J-20 fleet. So faced with the prospect of being overwhelmed by the swarm, American strategy has shifted from attempting to match the enemy's numbers to attempting to change the fundamental rules of the game. The answer to the J-20 is not a better F-22. It is a radical reinvention of aerial warfare known as Next Generation Air Dominance, NGAD. To understand NGAD, one must unlearn the lessons of the last century. For decades, air superiority was defined by a single platform, the P-51 Mustang, the F-15 Eagle, the F-22 Raptor. These were solitary knights of the sky. Each engagement was a duel. Each loss was a tragedy. NGAD is not a plane. It is a system of systems. At its center sits a sixth-generation manned fighter, a machine rumored to be larger. It's faster and stealthier than anything that has flown before. But unlike the Raptor, this aircraft is not designed to be the primary shooter. It is not a dogfighter in the traditional sense. It is a quarterback, a flying battle management station designed to remain alive in the most hostile airspace on Earth, while orchestrating a complex web of sensors and weapons, all while remaining invisible to the enemy. But a quarterback needs a team. And this is where the American response to the swarm takes its most consequential shape. The solution to the numbers problem, the terrifying disparity of 1080 Raptors against 1,000 Dragons, is a program called the Collaborative Combat Aircraft, or CCA. In plain language, Loyal Wingman. High-performance autonomous drones powered by advanced artificial intelligence, designed to fly alongside manned fighters and reshape every aspect of aerial warfare. The logic is ruthless and economic. An F-35 costs approximately $80 million and carries a human pilot whose training requires years and millions more. Losing one is a tragedy and a permanent strategic reduction. CCA might cost $15 to $20 million. It has no pilot, no life support, no ejection seat, no fear. It is attritable, a cold military term, meaning it can be sacrificed to achieve the mission, without the weight of a human life in the equation. Reimagine the J-20 swarm scenario, but rewrite the script. A flight of 4 manned American fighters enters the contest zone. Alongside them fly 12 to 16 autonomous drones. The enemy radar sees a cloud of targets. It cannot distinguish the $80 million manned fighter from the expendable robot. This creates a targeting dilemma of profound consequence. Fire long-range missiles at drones and deplete precious magazines against cheap decoys, or hesitate and allow the swarm to close the distance. These robotic wingmen also solve the magazine depth crisis that has plagued the stealth fleet. An F-22 carries 6 missiles internally. A single manned fighter controlling for drones effectively brings a flying arsenal into the engagement. Drones acting as missile trucks carrying additional AIM-120s or next-generation AIM-260s, waiting for the authorization to fire. The manned aircraft remains invisible, designating targets with its advanced sensors. The pilot authorizes. The drones release. The J-20 swarm is no longer facing a thin blue line of outnumbered pilots. It is facing a robotic wall of fire that can absorb losses and keep shooting. Furthermore, the CCA concept directly counters the tanker killer strategy. If J-20s can no longer sprint unopposed toward defenseless tankers, that entire strategic pillar collapses. In the future, envisioned by American planners, those tankers will not be alone. They will be escorted by autonomous defensive drones, forming a perimeter hundreds of miles out. Sensors, interceptors, machines, willing to fly directly into the path of an incoming missile to protect the asset behind them. This shift represents a fundamental realignment of the competition between the two superpowers. China has won the hardware race of the early 21st century. They have proven they can bend metal, cast engines, and assemble airframes faster than the United States. They have the shipyards, they have the factories, they have the will. But the United States is now betting its survival on a different race, the software race. NGAD and the CCA programs rely less on industrial mass and more on silicon, code, and algorithms. The wager is that American artificial intelligence, sensor fusion, and autonomous networking can create a force multiplier powerful enough to negate the raw numerical superiority of the People's Liberation Army Air Force. It is a contest between the swarm and the hive mind, between mass, steel, and fire, and distributed, interconnected machines that think faster than a human can react. However, this strategy is a gamble of unprecedented proportions. It relies on technology that is still being matured. It demands artificial intelligence trustworthy enough to authorize missile releases, data links jam-proof in contested electromagnetic environments, production lines for drones spun up rapidly enough to reach meaningful scale. Before the J-20 fleet reaches its own peak, the United States Air Force plans to build at least 1,000 collaborative combat aircraft matching the J-20 swarm drone for jet. But unlike the J-20, which is flying today in operational squadrons, the CCA fleet is still largely in prototype testing and early development. The timeline is tight. Margin for error is thin. The balance of air power in the Pacific once tilted so heavily toward the United States that the outcome of any conflict seemed predetermined, has been leveled by the sheer industrial tenacity of China. The J-20 is a reality that cannot be wished away. It is a masterpiece of mass production, armed now with engines to match its ambition. Threatening to sweep the sky through the brute mathematics of scale, the United States has recognized that it cannot win a fair fight against this swarm. It cannot outbuild the dragon. So it has decided to stop fighting fair. It is turning to the ghost in the machine. The future of air superiority will not be determined by who has the best pilot or the tightest turning radius. It will be determined by the race between Chinese hardware production and American software innovation. If the United States can field its legion of loyal wingmen before the J-20 fleet reaches its peak, the balance may be restored. If it cannot, the Pacific sky belongs to the swarm. We are watching the end of the fighter-pilot era and the uncertain, dangerous, exhilarating birth of the algorithmic age. China built the dragon. America's building the ghost in the machine. One is already flying. One is still a promise. And somewhere over the Pacific, the clock is running.